6.1 Step 1, choose a book to read. Learning target for this video is students will be able to find a book from the PRL that they want to read. I put PBL in your packet. Change it to PRL. I was using the old abbreviation. Here's a question to have in your mind. What are we doing for the last English unit of our high school career? Here it is, Unit 6. First question in your Cornell notes is, what is the Canon of Literature? And after talking to some of you, it sounds like you know the word canon, but you don't know it in context to literature. So people know the Star Wars canon or the canon of a certain video game as being essential material, right? Well, the Canon of Literature is similar. It's the most important, influential, or definitive works in literature. It's really got to be essential in order to be considered canonical. The term itself, canon, comes from an ancient Greek word for a measuring rod or a standard. So the idea is that any new piece of literature is compared to the old piece of literature, the item from the canon, and is like a measuring rod or a standard. The canon is in a constant state of adaptation and change because there is new literature being written all of the time. And so it is something that's in flux, and you're not going to see the same exact titles from one person's list to another person's list, but you'll see similar types of texts. And it's the kind of thing that academians, scholars love to talk about at length. What belongs in the canon of literature and what does not. At the same time, there are a lot of things that are omitted from this canon because it's really mostly chosen by an elite group of scholars and critics who embraced a work of art and sent it aloft to some deifying realm, according to this article. And maybe it doesn't deserve to be there. So it's problematic in terms of the fact that a small group of people decides what's canonical and what is not. Here's a list of texts that might often be considered in the Western canon of literature. Odyssey by Homer from 750 BC, the Divine Comedy by Dante, Latin. Oh no, it's not Latin, excuse me. The Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, Old English. Macbeth, this is early modern English, right? Shakespeare. And then if you look at those four works, they span over 2,000 years. So, then we move into the 1800s and we have several texts just from one century. So the older a piece is, the probably more firmly cemented in the canon it is, but then also the fewer works there are. You just don't have them in existence anymore, and also probably more, the more recent you get, the more relevant texts are as well. So you can see we move to the 20th century here. Really most of the pieces in this particular list and most lists of the Western canon of literature are going to be written by dead white guys. And so that's a problem. It's changed a little bit. We got Gabriel Garcia Marquez representing Latin America and Toni Morrison, African-American woman. But for the most part, there's very few women and everybody's white. So that's a concern. And one nice thing about IB is they have taken that into consideration. They still want to have a list because they want us to be reading great works of literature, but they don't necessarily want us just reading dead white guys, which is pretty cool. Get with the times, Cope. It's PRL. It stands for Prescribed Reading List. It is IB's list of authors worth studying. And their aim really is to include a wide variety of voices representing different perspectives and regions. And they have thousands of names on their list. it contains authors also not just from the English language, but other languages as well. And it's organized based on language, gender, centuries in which they lived and wrote, places they're associated with, and the literary forms of the text they wrote. Let me show you a quick example of the PRL, and see if I can escape my... Okay. So, I'm still saying it wrong. It's the prescribed reading list. Gosh. PRL, PRL, PRL. And I want to show you something because Terry brought this up yesterday, and this was pretty cool because he wanted to read Monster, which is manga by Naoki Urasawa. And so I typed in Naoki Urasawa into the search box up here, and nothing popped up. And so I said, oh, sorry, you can't read it. But then, a few minutes later, he said, hey, I found it. It's right here. And the way that he found it was he went to subcategory, manga. All right? Now, you can't read literature for children. You can't read all of these different subcategories. But if you want to read something that's manga and it's 200 pages or longer, okay, you can read it. And so he was able to find it that way. Mostly, I have searched by author. So I would have any for that category, and then I just put the author on here. Ava was looking for something by Dostoevsky, and you can see that he pops up here, Fyodor Dostoevsky, one of my favorite authors. And so you can read anything that he has written. If the author's name is on the prescribed reading list, you get to read anything they wrote, as long as it's about 200 pages. If you feel like you should be able to read something and it doesn't fit my prescription, then just talk to me and we'll figure something out, okay? All right, so that's the prescribed reading list. The link is in Schoology. Let's get back to, the slideshow. All right, so moving on to the requirements for picking a book for this unit. The first thing is the author has to be on the PRL. Okay, so that is key. If you're having trouble finding that PRL, let me know and I can help you out. The book has to have at least 178 pages. Why 178? Well, because that's how long God Help the Children is by Toni Morrison. If you pick a book that we don't have in the classroom, then you're responsible for finding a copy of it. These are the books that I have in the classroom on a cart, and they all work very well. They're all great examples of good literature. Beloved by Toni Morrison, God Help the Child by Toni Morrison, The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, Going After Cacciato, and The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. All of these texts are contemporary American texts written in 1970 or later. Beloved is a neo-slave narrative, which would be interesting for you to read after having read a slave narrative first semester. God Help the Child is more contemporary, does not deal explicitly with slavery. The Handmaid's Tale is a dystopia where a totalitarian government has taken complete control of women's bodies. Going After Cacciato and The Things They Carried are both set in the Vietnam War and written by our homeboy Tim O'Brien from Minnesota. Native Son is considered to be the first novel of social protest written by an African American, published in 1940. Their Eyes Were Watching God, written by Zora Neale Hurston, a contemporary of Richard Wright, who wrote a very different book. Hers is much more a story of immersion, acceptance, and love. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte is in the 19th century, the 1800s. It's a love story, Victorian romance with a Byronic hero. The Road by Cormac McCarthy is a post-apocalyptic American text about a father and son trying to survive nuclear winter. Brave New World is another dystopia by Aldous Huxley from the middle of the 20th century, England. Enduring Love is also British by Ian McEwan, more contemporary. It's a thriller. In Cold Blood is like the grandfather or godfather of all true crime by Truman Capote from the 60s. Love Medicine, one of my all-time favorite books by Louise Erdrich, based in Minnesota and surrounding area. Louise Erdrich is an American Indian who grew up on the Ojibwe Reservation in North Dakota, and some of her stories are set there. The book reads like a collection of stories that are interconnected. Perfume by Patrick Suskind, written originally in German. The subtitle of that book is A Story of a Murderer. And then Blindness by Jose Saramago, which is another post-apocalyptic kind of story where the whole world goes blind because of a virus. All right, so those are the books I have for you. You can read anything that fits the list. The requirements for the book club are you have to have 2 to 4 people. Everyone has to be reading a different book, so no one in your book club can read the same book as you are reading. You will talk about your book 2 times only. On May 17th, you'll talk about the first half. On May 24th, you'll talk about the second half. And so your job is to make 2 reading deadlines, one for 5/17 and the second for 5/24. You'll record a summary of your discussion for each of the 2 mastery checks, 6.4 and 6.5, and I'll explain how that'll work as we get closer. And you have to like these people. You're picking them. What will the summative assessment be? It's going to be a creative summative assessment, including a lot of different options, and I'll talk to you more about it the closer we get to it. You'll do it independently, and the hard deadline is May 31st for the summative assessment. What else are we going to be working on for this unit? We are going to be preparing for Paper 1, the Guided Literary Analysis. 6.2 and 6.3 are on Paper 1. That's why we have more than 3 weeks to read the first half of your choice book, because you're also going to be working on prepping for that test and then taking the test on May 12th at 12:30 at Ho Church. It's worth half of your IB score, so we got to remember what it is and we got to prep for it. All right, once you are done watching the video and taking notes, then go ahead and do the 6.1 mastery check, which is in Schoology. It's a Google form, and you're going to tell me which book you're reading, who is in your book club, what books they're reading, and what your 2 reading deadlines are going to be. Have fun picking your book.